today for various applications, for various services, we use internet. We also use intranet for an organization, let us say a bank. A bank wants to establish communication from one branch to another branch of the same bank. So then we need some applications of the bank so that we can complete the transaction. So similarly, you want to verify or check your email. So what we do, we make a request using the browser. So using the browser, we connect to the corresponding mail server. Let's say, for example, www.gmail.com. And then we get a web page. We provide the username and password, and then we get to see the emails that we have received, or you want to send the emails. So that's an application. We are using an application, and that in the background, with the help of the network, is able to send the email as well as receive the email. So basically, network services are nothing but applications. Like web browser is one of the applications. That's a client-side application. If the user wants to access the web page, we require a browser. But what is in the background? Who is providing the web pages to us? So there is a web server available in the internet, and it is with the help of the browser we are able to connect from the computer, from the PC, or from the mobile phone to the web server. So there is a client component, there is a network component, and then there is a server component. So these three facilities or facilitates us to communicate from the client to the server, whether it is for email, or it is for web access, or for any banking applications, or even for our day-to-day communication. We use the social media like WhatsApp or Facebook. So it's the same thing. We use an app on the phone, WhatsApp or Twitter or like Facebook, and then we send some message or a picture, and this goes from, using the help of the network, it goes to the server, Facebook server or WhatsApp server. From there it goes to the person whom you wish to send. So all these are related to each other, whether we call it as an application or we call it as a networking service. So let's quickly have a look at the applications that is available here. So basically, application layer is the topmost model of the TCP/IP model or TCP/IP layer. So we have in the previous sessions learned about the OSI model and the TCP/IP model, and the top application is on the top always. And with the help of this application layer, we are able to send and receive data. With the help of the application layer, we are able to send and receive the data for the various applications. And some of the applications we use on the client side, on the user side, are web browser, FTP, Telnet, DNS, and many more. Whereas in the network layer also, we have discussed about certain protocols like routed protocols and routing protocols, and they are very limited in nature. Also in the data link layer, we have discussed about certain protocols. They are very limited in nature. But when it comes to the application layer, there are numerous applications, or many different applications and protocols like HTTP, FTP, SMTP, DNS, DHCP, and many more. We also call these applications as network services, because all these network services work based on a client-server model. So some of the examples of the browsers, web browsers, we use some of them. Maybe there's a popular one is Google Chrome or maybe Internet Explorer. For some of you, you may be using Firefox. There are so many different web browser applications, and all these are basically the client application helping the user to communicate with the remote server. And similar to web application, we also have FTP, File Transfer Protocol. FTP stands for File Transfer Protocol. This protocol helps to send and receive large amounts of data or files from the source to the destination, and some of them are available here: FileZilla, Servview, Wing. We also have popular services. These are the clients, basically the clients. On the server side, we have applications like for web access or for web services. We have applications like IIS, Internet Information Operating System, Windows Server Operating System. Windows operating system, Microsoft Windows Server operating system has IIS, and we also have an open source called Apache. Apache Web Server provides applications to host web services. Suppose you want to access any web page, let's say zoomgroup.com or google.com. So these web pages have to be hosted on these servers, web server applications, and the client would be using a web browser to access these web pages. So these are all the various networking services, and then we're going to look at today how to establish a data communication between these two networks. So this is one of the offices in, let's say, AMRVT city, and this is another office in Hyderabad city, and we want the users of this network. These are all the users, and these are all the other users in another network, and you want to enable communication. Like this user here should generate a request, and the request should go all the way via the router and reach the destination here. And similarly, when a user here in the local network of Hyderabad sends a request to a user in AMRVT, the request should go all the way and reach the destination. So we have to enable the local area network communication from one office to a local area network in another office. So in the previous session, we had briefly set up just a local area network to establish the communication within the office or within the organization. But now for our network services to work, we are using internet, and let's suppose this is one of your office network and this is the remote network. How do we enable the data communication? How does the data communication establish from the source to the destination if they are in two different networks? So to understand this, we are going to look at the various functions that the router performs. Of course, we have discussed about the various functions of the router already, but we'll take a real example of a network in AMRVT and another network in Hyderabad, and then we will see how the data moves from the local area network to the remote local area network. And we have set up a small network in the last session, the local area network, just to assign IP addresses, just to check the communication between them, as well as to see how the ARP protocol works. But that example we're going to extend by having two different office networks in two different cities, and then establish the data communication using the various networking protocols or routing protocols as well as network services. So to build this network, we're going to use the same application like last time, that is Cisco Packet Tracer. So let's start by creating a network in this simulator, and then we will also see how to establish the data communication and verify the data communication. So in this session, we will also be configuring the Cisco router so that the data can be forwarded from one network to another network. So let's get to see this software. This is the software that we have used in the last session to set up a small local area network, and today we're going to establish a wide area network. So we are going to consider one of the routers here and then use it in the open space. We can increase the size of these objects. And then we need another router in another city. So let's say this is the two different routers. And then we have a local area network. So we require switches in each office. So we use a switch in both these office networks. And then we need few computers. So we go to the end devices here and then create some objects, end device objects. So we'll have one server as well. So two PCs and one server just to represent a network. And similarly on the remote side as well, some computers and one server. So now we need to establish the physical connectivity between these. So we have, this is the connection wizard. So we can go to the connections, and like last time we can select how to connect these devices. connecting the router, switch and the PCs and the server. So one by one, using the same concept that we did last time, we can establish the physical connectivity. This is the server and the switch. We have the physical connectivity getting ready, and then we will check the communication between this local network and the remote local network. So we have the LAN ready now, and then we have to connect the switch to the router. Similarly, on the remote side also, the switch to the router. But to establish the connection from one city to another city, we require wide area network, for which we have two options. We can choose to use the Ethernet interface, or we can choose to use the serial interface. But if you observe that in the picture, we had discussed about the connectivity using the serial interface or WAN interface. So we have multiple types of interfaces available to set up the network. So this particular module or serial port module is not available by default in the modular Cisco routers. So we need to add additionally. So the question is, how do we add the serial port module? So just click on the router once, and then we have the device. You should turn off the device first, and then add this module WIC2T, this particular module. We have to click on this module and drag it to the open space. We have to click and drag it to the open space or slot here, and then we should power on the router. So similarly, we have to minimize this and then go to the next router. On this router also we have to perform the same task. Just click on the power button and then select the WIC2T module, click on this and drag it to this slot here, and then we have the module set up. So we need to turn on this router back and then minimize this window. So we have a serial port module available on these two routers now, and we have to establish the connectivity. So we have to select this option called serial DC cable. This is the cable that we have to select. Okay, so just click on the serial DC cable and then click on this router once, and then a small pop-up window appears. So we should choose one of the two serial port on this router. So let's choose serial 0/0/0, the first serial port, and then we should take the other end to the other router and then click on this router, and we can see that there is serial ports also available on this router. So select one of them. We can connect any port of the router to any other port. So we have now a physical connection available between the local area network in one city and local area network in another city. So we can create labels just to represent that this belongs to so and so city. So let's give the city name as AMRVT, and then we'll call this as, let's say, Hyderabad. So these are the two offices the company has, and we wish to communicate from this local area network to the remote local area network. So let's use our reference diagram here, and in this diagram you can see the IP addresses that have been mentioned here belongs to the router actually. This IP belongs to the local router. So we will have to assign IP address to these computers as well. So the IP addresses that we have to use in these two different networks, they must be different. Observe carefully. The IP address used in AMRVT is 192.168.201. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for various network devices. Similarly, the IP address that we are using on the Hyderabad network is different from that we used in AMRVT. That is 192.168.202.1 for the one router, and then similarly for other computers we'll have different unique IP addresses. So let's follow the same structure in our example as well. So for this computer, we have seen how to assign the IP addresses. Just click on the computer, so a pop-up window appears, go to the desktop tab, and then we have IP configuration settings. Just click on the IP configuration settings, we could assign the IP address to this PC 192.168.201. Some number, let's say 10, and then the subnet mask. So last time also we just assigned the IP address and subnet mask. We did not use the default gateway. But remember, to establish communication from one local area network to a remote local area network with the help of the router requires us to define the default gateway. So the default gateway is an important parameter. We have discussed in the previous sessions as well, that the default gateway is always the router's IP address. At this point of time, the router is not yet configured. We will learn how to configure the IP address to the router in a short while. And here we have to specify the IP address of the router 192.168.201.1. This is going to be the router's IP address. So we have assigned the IP address to the router, and then we can verify that the IPs have been assigned by using the command ipconfig. So we have the IP address, the subnet mask, as well as the default gateway. All the three parameters required to communicate with the remote network are available. So similarly, I'm going to add one IP address to this remote side computer, that is Hyderabad LAN computer IP address 192.168.202.10. So we have the IP addresses assigned, as well as the default gateway on this computer is supposed to be 192.168.202.1. This is the router IP address of Hyderabad. So we have assigned the basic parameters. All we need to do now is check whether there is communication possible. So we have the IP address of the PC and the subnet mask, as well as the default gateway. All the three parameters are present. So now we're going to generate a request or traffic to the remote computer that is in AMRVT network. The IP address is 192.168.201.10. This IP belongs to the computer in AMRVT network, and this IP belongs to the computer in the Hyderabad network. So you'll find that there is no communication between the two computers. Though they are in two different networks, there is no communication. So to enable this communication between two different networks, we have to use the routers, and on these routers we have to enable the routing protocols. So that's our next step. So let's look at how to configure the router. So you can see these ports on the router, they are all in red color or orange color. You can see here, means they are not yet been enabled, whereas here on the computer and the server to the switch, the ports are representing green, means they are operational. Of course, we have used only one IP address on the first computers on both sides, but even though we don't assign the IP address, the physical connectivity is operational. So to configure the router, click on this object and a pop-up window appears. We need to choose the option called CLI. So this is the option we have to choose to configure the router. So just click here, and then we have the information that is available to configure the router. So normally on a new router, when you're configuring for the first time, you will see this message called system configuration dialog, and you will get a message that would you like to configure yes or no. Normally at this point of time we would choose yes, but technically it is recommended to use the option no. So the moment you choose no, you get a message called press written to get started, where that written is nothing but the enter key. So just press the enter key and you get some prompt. So this is called as Cisco Routers Operating System Prompt, or also called IOS prompt. There are different modes in the router to configure. So we have the list of commands that are to be used mentioned in this presentation that we have just had a look. So to configure this, we have taken two different networks. One is called AMRVT and other is called Hyderabad, two different networks. If we check the communication between the two networks, and we verified that they were not able to communicate. Already we have checked that just now, because the router does not know the path or the route how to reach the destination. So now what we have to do is, on the routers we have to configure the router and then enable the routing protocols. So when we enable the routing protocols on these routers, then the router would forward the request from the local network. Once we configure these two routers with the routing protocols, then the data from one network would be allowed to go to the remote network and vice versa. This would happen only when the routing is enabled on these respective routers. So from what we have learned so far, we're going to see the different types of routing protocols. One is static routing, two is dynamic routing, and the third is default routing. So to start with, we will look at how to configure static route and the commands that we have to enable on the router, so that the network in AMRVT network can communicate with network in Hyderabad. So these are the various commands that we have represented here to use on the router. So first we are considering the AMRVT router to be configured. So we have already got to this stage that it is asking for a question that would you like to configure yes or no. So choose the option called no. We have mentioned that here. So once we choose the no option, we have this keyword called router with a greater than symbol. So which is exactly available here, router with a greater than symbol. So we have this keyword here, router with a greater than symbol. Now we need to give this command called enable as mentioned there. Once you give the command enable, the prompt will change from greater than symbol to hash symbol. So we are changing the mode from user mode to the privilege mode. So we cannot do any configuration here in this privilege mode also. So we have to go to the next level called configure space terminal. This command will let us go from the hash prompts. There is a message that is available, that is enter the configuration commands one per line. So it's a message, just a message. So we now go to the next command, that is we are changing the name of the router, which is default is router name. We want to change that to AMRVT, just a short form for AMRVT. So we use the command called host name to change the name of the router. We use a command called host name followed by what name we wish to give. You can see that the prompt which was router earlier has got changed to AMRVT. This is a short form. Okay, so we have changed the name. So next what we have to do is assign the IP address to the router's interfaces. I repeat, we have to assign the IP address to the router's interfaces. So the next command would be interface fast Ethernet space 0/0, and then we need to give the command IP address followed by the IP number that is allocated to this AMRVT router, that is 192.168.201.1, followed by the class C subnet mask, which is default subnet mask. And since by default all the ports are in the shutdown state, we must give the command no shutdown. We must give the command called no shutdown. And the moment we use this command no shutdown, you will find a message that pops up on the screen saying that the fast Ethernet port, which was in the down state by default, has now come to the up state by giving this command no shutdown. And we must mandatorily give this command no shutdown as well as the IP address for every interface which we wish to send and receive data. So this is the command that we will be using. And then the next, we have to also enable the WAN interface or the serial interface. We already assigned the IP address and we are given the no shutdown command. So on this AMRVT router, we have to configure the WAN port or the serial port. Remember, serial port is required to connect to the remote network or called as WAN. Maybe you may be connecting this to the internet as well. You may have to connect this interface to the internet as well. Maybe also we should consider another situation. In place of serial interface, you may be using the fast Ethernet interface 0/1 to connect to the ISP, because fast Ethernet 0/0 was connected to the local area network. We can have another interface used to connect to the ISP or to the remote network. And that remote network interface also requires an IP address, and we must give the command no shutdown. So we have now configured the Ethernet interface. The next interface we are going to configure is the serial interface /0/0/0, and then assign the IP address 172.16.0.1. This is the class B IP address, and the subnet mask is 255.255.0.0. And remember, we must give the command no shutdown every time we are configuring this interfaces. So you will find there is only one statement that is coming to show that the interface status is up. But once we configure the remote router, then we will get to see the second message as well. So at this point of time, we have assigned the IP address to the interfaces and then made the status of the interface to up. And now we must tell the AMRVT router how to reach the network of Hyderabad. And this is the different destination network. This is called as destination network. We are providing information to AMRVT router how to reach Hyderabad, and what is the next router's IP address which will guide to reach the destination. And then we have, this is called as static route. This is the configuration called static route. We are manually defining the path from Amravati to Hyderabad, and we will be doing the similar thing from Hyderabad router to Amravati router as well. Okay. So the next statement is to configure the static route with the command IP space route 192.168.202.0. This is the network ID. Remember, in one of the earlier sessions of IP address, we discussed about the network ID, the broadcast ID, as well as the valid IP. Valid IP is something we give to a single device, single computer, single printer or server, etc. Whereas network ID is something we represent for the whole organization LAN or the whole organization network. So whenever we create a static route, the static route must be done from the local network to the remote network. So we must have the knowledge or information about the remote network. So we have done the static route on the Amravati router, and now it's time to configure the Hyderabad router, after which we can check the communication that the local computer in Amravati will be able to access the remote server in the Hyderabad network, and similarly the local network in Hyderabad should be able to access the remote network server in Amravati. Okay, so let's look at this configuration. 255.255.255.0, and then the next hop IP address is 172.16.0.2. So this concludes our configuration of the Amravati router, and then we have to check the communication, before which we will verify the route, show IP route. So we have only one information, that is the local network information. We do not have the information of Hyderabad at this point of time because we have not configured the Hyderabad router yet. So let's quickly get to configure the Hyderabad router. And as discussed, we have to choose the option called CLI mode, and then we have the option called do you wish to configure the router, yes or no. So we should choose the option no, and then we come to this basic prompt where we give the command enable and then give the command configure space terminal, and then we give the command host name, and then we give the keyword to represent the name of that particular office network router, and then we give the command interface fast Ethernet 0/0, and then assign the IP address to the interface, IP address 192.168.202.1, and then the subnet mask 255.255.255.0, and then the command no shutdown. This will activate the interface fast Ethernet 0/0, and then we go to the interface serial 0/0/0, assign the WAN interface IP address 172.16.0.2, and then the class B subnet mask, and then the command no space shutdown. So with this, the basic assignment of the IP addresses to the interfaces is complete, and we have to create a static route from Hyderabad to reach Amravati network. So let's complete that as well to verify. So the IP address of the Hyderabad network to Amravati network is 190 IP route 192.168.201.0, followed by the subnet mask and then the next hop IP address. Now with this, if you verify the routing table called show IP route, you could see that there is a static route. So you can see the codes here. The codes here represent the name of, you can see here static, S for static. So we just created a static route from Hyderabad to Amravati, and then we can see in the output that there was a static route created, and this is the path, this is a route available from Hyderabad to Amravati network. At the same time, when we come from the output that we have in Amravati network, there is a different output now. There is a path available from Amravati to Hyderabad. This is the local area network of Hyderabad network. So now if we go to the computer, this is the computer from which we could check the reachability. So remember, this is the IP address of Amravati network. So we want to check the reachability to the Hyderabad network 202.192.160.202.10. So you will find that there is communication available from this network to the remote network. You can see here there is a successful communication. In the previous examples, we have seen that ping is a command to check the reachability from source to destination. So now there is reachability. So now let's go to the Hyderabad network and check the communication towards Amravati network. So there is communication possible, which was not possible earlier because we have enabled the routing in the Hyderabad router as well as Amravati router. Static route has been defined. You can see the ports are green, which means they are active, and there is a route available from Hyderabad network to Amravati network as well as from Amravati network to Hyderabad network. For both sides, we have created the static route and there is communication possible. So let's create a web server here, a quick web server. We need to assign the IP address to this web server as well, 192.168.201.100. This is the IP address of the web server in Amravati network. We need to provide the default gateway IP address as well, which is a router IP address, and we need to check that there is the IP is configured properly. Go to the command prompt and give the command IP config. So you can see the parameters is assigned. Now we go to the services and then go to HTTP services. In this, there is a message already available. So just to create some message here, we give welcome to Amravati network. So we created a small message and then we're going to save it, and then we go to the PC in the Hyderabad network, close this window, go to the web server web page. Here we are going to type the IP address of the web server in Amravati network, 192.168.201.100, and then you can see that there is a message, welcome to Amravati network. So you can see there was a message arrived from Hyderabad requesting the web page of Amravati server. So similarly, on the Hyderabad network, we will create similar IP address relating to Hyderabad network, 192.168.202.100, and then the default gateway 192.168.202.1. I'm sorry, this is the DNS server. Yeah, here, correct. So we have assigned the IP address on the server in Hyderabad network. So let's verify IP config. So we have got to see, sorry, yeah, here we have the IP address of the server as well as of the default gateway. So now we go to the services, and in the services we give the command welcome to Hyderabad network. So we've given some message here. So we could see this message available when we access from AMRVT network. We want to access this server. So we go to the PC in AMRVT network, close this window, go to the web browser. This is the object, web browser object, and then we will type the IP address of the server of Hyderabad 192.168.202.100. This is the server IP address, and then we can see the web page. So you can see here the message welcome to Hyderabad network. So this is how we could verify that we have the access from one local area network. So this is a local area network of AMRVT, and we want to access the remote network of Hyderabad, as well as the local network of Hyderabad should be able to access the remote network of AMRVT. So we were able to provide this communication because of the help of the router as well as the routing protocols that we have enabled on the router. So this requires an important things like establishing the local area network, using the local router, and providing the input of the IP address of the LAN, IP address of the WAN, as well as enabling the routing protocols. So we have seen there were three different methods of routing, that is static routing, dynamic routing, and default routing. So we can use any of these methods which is suitable for the organization, but for small organization networks with few branch offices, we prefer to use the static routing. And this static routing has to be enabled both on the source router as well as on the destination router. So both the routers should have knowledge of the remote network, and that information is manually provided by the administrator. But if the network is big, let's say an ISP, or let's say a bank which has hundreds of branches all over the country, so we will not be able to use the static route. So we have to use dynamic route or dynamic routing protocols for such large networks. So on the internet we have lots of ISPs across the globe, and these ISPs use dynamic routing protocols. For small organizations we use static routing, for large organizations and ISPs we use dynamic routing. So we have seen in today's session how to build a network with two branch offices, and how to assign IP addresses and the default gateway, and we also have seen the important concept of how to configure the router, Cisco router, using this Cisco Packet Tracer Simulator. So you can download this application from netacad.com. It's a free registration, and then you can download it, and then you can set up this on your own PC, on your own laptop. You can run this application and learn how to build or set up networks and enable communication with the help of the router. So today, to summarize, we have learned about the applications, networking services, the client application, the server application, and we also have learned about how to configure the router and verify the communication between the PC and the web server. So we can enable many more such applications like FTP, email. All this also can be enabled in this type of networks. So I hope this session was informative and you will take advantage of this. And in the next session, we will learn about how to actually connect to the internet and what are the other protocols and services required to enable internet. Thank you.
Hello, good morning students. Welcome to Mana TV. Welcome to TALLY training program conducted by APSSDC. Right. In yesterday's class, we have seen about the vouchers what we have in TALLY. So almost all we have discussed about 13 to 14 voucher types. Right. అంటే నిన్న టాలీలో మనము వోచర్స్ ఎన్ని రకాలు ఉన్నాయి, అది ఏ టైంలో యూజ్ చేస్తామనేది మనం నిన్న డిస్కస్ చేసాం, ఒక థియరీ పార్ట్. రైట్. టుడే we are going to discuss about all the vouchers, how to use those vouchers. Yesterday what we have discussed, that all vouchers now we are going to discuss in a practical mode. Right. So నిన్న మనం ఏదైతే 12 వోచర్స్ టైప్స్ చూసాము, అవి వాళ్ళ టాలీలో ఎలా చేయాలి ఏంటి అనేది మనం డిస్కస్ చేస్తాము. సో దాని గురించి నేను ఒక ప్రాబ్లం డిజైన్ చేశాను మీకు. ఓకే, ఆ ప్రాబ్లమ్ని టోటల్గా కంప్లీట్ చేస్తాం. ఇఫ్ పాసిబుల్ టుడే వీఆర్ గోయింగ్ టు కంప్లీట్ టుడే, ఇఫ్ నాట్ ద సేమ్ విల్ బి కంటిన్యూడ్ ఇన్ ద నెక్స్ట్ క్లాస్. ఓకే, సో ప్లీజ్ సీ ద స్క్రీన్. రైట్. సో హియర్ ఐఎమ్ షోయింగ్ వన్ ప్రాబ్లమ్. దిస్ ఈస్ గణేష్ ఎలక్ట్రానిక్స్. రైట్. సో గణేష్ ఎలక్ట్రానిక్స్ అన్న వాళ్ళ యొక్క ట్రాన్సాక్షన్స్ ఇవన్నీ అన్నమాట. ఓకే, దీస్ ఆర్ ద ట్రాన్సాక్షన్స్ ఆఫ్ గణపతి ట్రేడింగ్ కంపెనీ. రైట్. కొంచెం జూమ్ చేశాను, సో యూ క్యాన్ హ్యావ్ ఎ లుక్ ఆఫ్ ఇట్. ఓకే, దీస్ ఆర్ ద ట్రాన్సాక్షన్స్, దీస్ ఆర్ ద అడ్జస్ట్మెంట్స్ అండ్ దీస్ ఆర్ ద ఆన్సర్స్. ఓకే, మీకు ఇవి ట్రాన్సాక్షన్స్ ఉన్నాయి. సో యూ హ్యావ్ ట్రాన్సాక్షన్స్. ఓకే, యూ హ్యావ్ అడ్జస్ట్మెంట్స్ అండ్ యూ హ్యావ్ ఆన్సర్స్. దెన్ హౌ టు do this in TALLY we are going to see now. So as we discussed that accounting process have 5 steps. That is, step number 1 creation of company, step number 2 creation of ledgers, step number 3 creation of inventory, step number 4 voucher entry, and step number 5 reports. Right. So first, this is a company, Ganesh, name called Ganesh Electronics. So first we are going to create the company. So how to create a company? Alt F3, go for create company. Okay, and write the name Ganesh Electronics. Okay, just name I am writing as Vijayawada. Okay, state is Andhra Pradesh. So now phone number and all I am writing here. Right. I don't want to use any passwords here, so I am not using password here. So the first step, creation of company, we have done with that. Right. The next step is creation of ledger accounts. So what are the ledger accounts we have to create now? Okay, so Mr. Ganesh started business with cash. Okay, amount is 5 lakhs. Okay, first we have to create here Ganesh account. Okay, so how to create the ledger accounts? Accounting info, ledgers, create Ganesh capital account under capital. Okay, next one is open bank account with SBI Karkhana branch. SBI bank account, SBI bank under bank accounts. Okay, next one, purchase goods from Sony Enterprises. So include some purchase account data to Sony Enterprises. So purchase under purchase accounts. Okay, purchase goods from Sony Enterprises. So we are purchasing, so it comes under sundry creditors. So the purchase goods from Shah Enterprises. So already purchase account create chesam kabatti, now we are going to create Shah Enterprises under sundry creditors. Right. purchase furniture for business use and issue check. సో ఇక్కడ పర్చేస్ గూడ్స్ అన్నాము, అందుకే పర్చేస్ అకౌంట్ క్రియేట్ చేసాము. ఇక్కడ పర్చేస్ ఫర్నిచర్, సో ఫర్నిచర్ ఈజ్ అన్ ఐటమ్, రైట్? ఫర్నిచర్ కమ్స్ అండర్ రియల్ అకౌంట్, సో ఫర్నిచర్ ఇస్ అన్ ఐటమ్, ఇట్స్ అన్ అసెట్. సో క్రియేట్ ఫర్నిచర్ అకౌంట్ అండర్ ఫిక్స్డ్ అసెట్స్. ఓకే, ఇక్కడ మనం ఇష్యూ చెక్ అన్నాం. ఓకే, సో వెంటనే చెక్ ఇష్యూ చేశాను కాబట్టి ఆల్రెడీ చెక్ అంటే ద అమౌంట్ గోస్ ఫ్రమ్ బ్యాంక్. సో ఆల్రెడీ వీ హావ్ క్రియేట్ ఎస్బీఐ బ్యాంక్ అకౌంట్, రైట్? నెక్స్ట్ వన్ ఇస్ సోల్డ్ గూడ్స్ ఫర్ క్యాష్. సో సోల్డ్ గూడ్స్ ఫర్ క్యాష్ అంటే ఎంట్రీ ఏమొస్తుంది? క్యాష్ అకౌంట్ ట్యాప్ టు సేల్స్. సో ఆల్రెడీ మన దగ్గర క్యాష్ అకౌంట్ ఉంటుంది. దర్ ఇస్ నో నీడ్ టు క్రియేట్, వీ హావ్ టు క్రియేట్ ఓన్లీ సేల్స్ అకౌంట్ అండర్ సేల్స్, రైట్? నెక్స్ట్ వన్ sold goods and received check. So sales account already create chesam, check ante bank already bank account create chesam. Next one is sold goods and received check. So already sales account chesamu, check account undi. Paid for transportation on purchases. So we have to create transportation on purchase under direct expense. ఓకే, అలాగే నెక్స్ట్ వన్ ఏముంది? ట్రాన్స్పోర్టేషన్ ఆన్ సేల్స్. ట్రాన్స్పోర్టేషన్ ఆన్ సేల్స్ అండర్ ఇండైరెక్ట్ ఎక్స్పెన్స్. నెక్స్ట్ పేడ్ ఫర్ ఆఫీస్ ఎక్స్పెన్సెస్. సో క్రియేట్ ఆఫీస్ expenses under indirect expense.